Nina Rodriguez sat in the corner of the coffee shop, trying to make herself as small as possible. Her hands wrapped around a cup of tea that had gone cold 20 minutes ago. She hadn't taken a single sip. Every few seconds, her eyes darted to the entrance, then to the windows facing the street, then back to her phone. It was 6:30 in the evening. She should have been home by now. Should have been on her couch, maybe watching something mindless on television, trying to forget about the long day at work. But she couldn't go home, not yet. Not when she knew he might be waiting there. The coffee shop was one of those modern places with exposed brick walls and hanging plants. Soft jazz played through the speakers. Around her, people tapped away on laptops or chatted with friends. Everyone seemed so normal, so relaxed. Nina envied them. She couldn't remember the last time she'd felt relaxed. Her phone buzzed. Her whole body tensed. She looked at the screen and felt her stomach drop. Another text from a number she didn't recognize. "I just want to talk. Why won't you answer me?" She blocked the number, just like she'd blocked the last 5 numbers. Derek always found a way to get through, always. Nina took a shaky breath and looked out the window again. That's when she saw him. Derek was standing across the street, partially hidden behind a parked car, but she'd recognize that green jacket anywhere. He was staring directly at the coffee shop, directly at her. Her heart started pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. This was the 3rd time this week. Monday, he'd been outside her office building when she left work. Wednesday, he'd shown up at her gym. And now here he was again, somehow knowing exactly where she'd be. They'd broken up 3 months ago. 3 months. But Derek couldn't seem to accept it was over. At first, it had just been texts. Lots of texts. Apologizing, asking for another chance, promising he'd change. Nina had tried to be kind at first, tried to explain gently that they weren't right for each other. But kind hadn't worked. Firm hadn't worked. Even blocking him hadn't worked. Then he'd started showing up places. Her workplace, her apartment building, the grocery store she always went to on Sunday mornings. Always watching. Always waiting. Never quite doing anything she could report to the police, but always there, making her feel like she couldn't breathe. Nina's hands were shaking now. She put her phone down on the table because she was afraid she might drop it. She couldn't keep living like this. She couldn't keep looking over her shoulder every second of every day. But she didn't know what to do. The one time she'd called the police, they'd been sympathetic but said there wasn't much they could do unless he threatened her or tried to hurt her. "Just keep documenting everything," the officer had said. "If it escalates, come back and we can help you file for a restraining order." If it escalates. As if this wasn't already terrifying enough. Nina glanced at the table next to hers. A man sat alone reading something on his tablet. He was probably in his mid-30s, wearing jeans and a gray hoodie. He had dark hair and looked tired, like he'd also had a long day. He'd been there when she arrived, hadn't looked up once, seemed completely absorbed in whatever he was reading. She looked back at the window. Derek was still there. He'd moved slightly, was now standing next to a street lamp, arms crossed, waiting. Nina felt tears starting to burn behind her eyes. She blinked them back. She would not cry, not here, not where Derek might see her through the window and know he was getting to her. But she couldn't leave. If she left, Derek would follow her. He'd follow her to her car or to the subway station. He'd try to talk to her, to corner her somewhere. The coffee shop felt safe because there were other people around. Witnesses. But she couldn't stay here forever. Her chest felt tight. She realized she was breathing too fast, almost hyperventilating. This was how panic attacks started. She'd had 2 of them in the past month, both times after running into Derek somewhere unexpected. The man at the next table looked up. Nina quickly looked away, embarrassed. She didn't want anyone to see her like this, didn't want to draw attention to herself. But when she glanced back at the window, Derek had moved even closer. He was now standing directly in front of the coffee shop, looking through the glass. That's when Nina made a decision. Maybe it was reckless. Maybe it was stupid. But she was desperate, and desperate people do things they normally wouldn't do. She turned to the man at the next table. Her voice came out quieter than she intended, almost a whisper. "Excuse me. I'm sorry to bother you, but I need help." The man looked up immediately. His eyes were kind, concerned. He set his tablet down. "Are you okay?" he asked. Nina shook her head. Her voice was trembling now. "There's a man outside. He's been following me. I don't know what to do." The man's expression changed instantly. He sat up straighter, alert. Where? Standing right in front of the window. Green jacket? The man looked, but did it casually, like he was just glancing around the coffee shop. Nina saw his jaw tighten slightly when he spotted Derek. How long has this been going on? He asked, his voice calm but serious. Weeks. We used to date. We broke up 3 months ago, but he won't leave me alone. He keeps showing up everywhere I go. The words tumbled out of her now. It felt like a relief to finally tell someone. I don't know how he knows where I am. I think he might be tracking my phone or my car or something. I called the police, but they said they can't do anything unless he threatens me. The man nodded slowly, taking it all in. Then he did something Nina didn't expect. He picked up his tablet and his coffee cup and moved to her table, sitting down across from her like they'd planned to meet there all along. What's your name? He asked quietly. Nina. I'm James. Here's what we're going to do, Nina. We're going to sit here and talk like we're old friends meeting up for coffee. I want you to relax your shoulders if you can. Smile if you're able to. We're going to make it look like you're not alone and that you're having a nice time. Okay? Nina nodded, trying to do what he said. It was hard to relax when every muscle in her body felt wound tight as a spring. James started talking in an easy, conversational tone. He was telling her about something funny that happened to him last week. Some story about his neighbor's cat getting stuck in a tree. Nina tried to listen, tried to respond naturally, but her eyes kept flicking to the window. Derek was still there, but now he looked uncertain. He was staring at Nina and James, his expression confused, maybe even angry. Don't look at him, James said gently. Look at me. He needs to see that you're not intimidated, that you have people in your life. Nina forced herself to focus on James. He had a nice face, she realized. Strong features but gentle eyes. The kind of person who looked like they'd be good in a crisis. And his voice was steady, reassuring. Has he ever hurt you? James asked, still keeping his tone conversational like they were discussing the weather. No, not physically, but he says things that scare me. In his texts, he says he can't live without me, that I'm making a mistake, that we're meant to be together. Sometimes he sounds angry. Sometimes he sounds desperate, James nodded. Those are concerning patterns. This kind of behavior often escalates. He pulled out his phone. I'm going to give you my number. If this happens again, if he shows up somewhere or you feel unsafe, I want you to call me. No matter what time it is. Nina stared at him. I can't ask you to do that. You don't even know me. You didn't ask. I'm offering, and you're right, I don't know you. But I know what it's like to feel helpless when someone you care about is in danger. His voice had changed slightly, like he was remembering something painful. My sister went through something similar when she was in college. I was states away and couldn't help her. She was terrified and I felt useless. So if I can help someone else in that situation, I'm going to. Tears filled Nina's eyes again, but this time they weren't from fear. They were from relief, from gratitude, from the overwhelming kindness of a complete stranger. Thank you, she whispered. They sat there for another 15 minutes, talking about nothing important. James told her about his favorite hiking trails. Nina told him about the marketing project she was working on at her job. Slowly, her breathing returned to normal. Her hands stopped shaking. When Nina finally looked at the window again, Derek was gone. James walked her to her car. He stood nearby while she checked the back seat and underneath, making sure Derek hadn't tampered with anything. Then he gave her his phone number and made her promise to document everything Derek did. Every text, every time he showed up somewhere, every strange phone call. Take screenshots of everything, James said. Write down dates and times. If you need to get a restraining order, you'll need evidence. And change your routine if you can. Go to different coffee shops. Take different routes home. Make it harder for him to predict where you'll be. Nina nodded, taking mental notes of everything. And Nina, James added, this isn't your fault. You didn't do anything wrong. Sometimes people just can't handle rejection in a healthy way. That's on him, not you. Nina drove home that night feeling something she hadn't felt in weeks. Hope. Maybe she wasn't as alone as she'd thought. Maybe there were still good people in the world who helped for no reason other than because it was the right thing to do. The next morning, Nina walked into her office building with her head held a little higher. She worked for a tech company downtown, in the marketing department on the 7th floor. It was a good job, one she'd worked hard to get. She wasn't going to let Derek take that away from her. Her colleague Maya was already at her desk when Nina arrived. "Morning," Maya said, looking up from her computer. "You look better today. Everything okay?" Nina had told Maya a little bit about the Derek situation. Not everything, but enough that Maya knew to check in on her. "Yeah," Nina said. "I think things might be getting better." She'd barely sat down at her desk when her manager, Brad, came out of his office looking flustered. "Okay, everyone listen up," Brad announced to the marketing team. "Big news. The CEO is coming to visit our floor today. He's doing a walkthrough of all the departments. He never does this, so I want everyone on their best behavior. Clean desks, professional attitudes. This is a big deal." The office erupted in nervous chatter. Their CEO was famously hands-off with the day-to-day operations. He'd built the company from nothing 10 years ago, and now ran it from the executive floor. Most people who worked there had never even seen him in person. Nina straightened her desk and tried to focus on her work. She had a presentation to prepare for next week. But it was hard to concentrate with everyone around her buzzing with nervous energy about the CEO's visit. An hour later, Brad came rushing back. "He's here. He's coming down the hallway." Nina looked up as a group of people in business suits entered the marketing floor. There were several senior executives she recognized from company emails. And in the center of the group, dressed in a perfectly tailored navy suit, was the CEO. Nina's heart stopped. Her mouth fell open. She gripped the edge of her desk to steady herself. It was James, the man from the coffee shop. The stranger who had helped her last night was James Wellington, the CEO of her entire company. Their eyes met across the room. For just a second, she saw surprise flicker across his face too. Then his expression smoothed into professional politeness as Brad began introducing him to the team members. Nina couldn't breathe. This couldn't be happening. Of all the people in all the coffee shops in the entire city, she'd asked her CEO for help. She'd cried in front of him. She'd told him about Derek, about being followed, about feeling scared and helpless. She wanted to disappear into the floor. What must he think of her? That she was unprofessional, that she had too much drama in her personal life? What if he thought she'd known who he was and had manipulated the situation somehow? James was making his way around the room now, shaking hands, asking people about their projects. He was getting closer to her desk. Nina's palms were sweating. She had no idea what to say to him. When he finally reached her desk, he extended his hand with a professional smile. "And you are?" "Nina Rodriguez, sir, junior marketing analyst." They shook hands. His grip was firm and brief, professional. He gave no indication whatsoever that they'd ever met before. "What are you working on, Nina?" he asked. She somehow managed to explain her current project without her voice shaking too much. He asked a couple of thoughtful questions, nodded, thanked her for her work, and moved on to the next desk. The entire interaction lasted maybe 90 seconds. Then he and his entourage left the floor, and everyone exhaled collectively. "Wow," Maya said. "That was intense. Did you see how young he is?" "I didn't realize." Nina nodded, unable to speak. Her mind was racing. What now? Would he say something to someone about last night? Would he think less of her professionally? The rest of the day passed in a blur. Nina couldn't focus on anything. She kept replaying the coffee shop scene in her head, then his face when he saw her this morning, analyzing every expression, every word. At 4:30 in the afternoon, Brad appeared at her desk looking puzzled. "Nina, you're needed on the executive floor. The CEO's assistant just called." Nina's stomach dropped. This was it. She was going to be fired, or transferred, or something. She took the elevator up to the top floor with her heart pounding. The executive floor was completely different from her department. Everything was sleek and modern, all glass walls and expensive furniture. The CEO's assistant, a professional woman in her 50s, greeted her and led her to a large office at the end of the hall. James was sitting behind his desk, but he stood when she entered. The assistant closed the door behind her, leaving them alone. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then James said, "Nina, I owe you an apology." Nina stood frozen in the doorway of the CEO's office. her mind racing with 1,000 thoughts at once. James Wellington gestured to one of the chairs across from his desk. "Please sit down," he said gently. She walked across the plush carpet and sat, her back straight, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She felt like she was about to get scolded by a principal, even though she knew that didn't make sense. Still, the power dynamic had shifted completely from last night. In the coffee shop, he'd been James, a kind stranger. Here, surrounded by floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, he was Mr. Wellington, her boss's boss's boss. James sat down across from her and leaned forward slightly. "I want to apologize for not telling you who I was last night. That wasn't fair to you." Nina blinked, surprised. She'd expected a lot of things, but not an apology. "You don't need to apologize. You helped me when I needed it. I'm the one who should apologize. I had no idea who you were, and I just unloaded all my problems on you. It was completely unprofessional." "Nina, you were scared and asking for help. There's nothing unprofessional about that." He paused, his expression serious. "I was at that coffee shop because I'd had a long day and wanted to be somewhere I could think without anyone knowing who I was. It's hard to explain, but sometimes it's exhausting being the CEO. Everyone wants something, or they're nervous around me, or they're putting on an act. I just wanted an hour to be nobody special." Nina nodded slowly. She could understand that. Even if his world was so different from hers, it might as well be another planet. "When I saw you were in trouble," James continued, "my first instinct was just to help. I wasn't thinking about work or positions or any of that. I was thinking about my sister and how I wished someone had been there for her when she needed it." He met her eyes directly. "I'm glad I was there, and I meant everything I said last night. If you need help with this situation, I want you to call me." "I can't do that," Nina said quietly. "You're the CEO. I'm just a junior analyst. People already noticed you spoke to me this morning. If they find out you're helping me with personal problems, they'll think I'm getting special treatment or trying to manipulate the situation somehow." James frowned. "What people think doesn't matter. Your safety matters." "With respect, sir, it's easy to say that when you're at the top. For someone like me, what people think makes a huge difference. I worked hard to get this job. I don't want anyone questioning whether I earned it or whether I'm staying because of connections rather than my work." James was quiet for a moment, considering her words. "You're right. I wasn't thinking about how it would look from your perspective. I apologize for that too." He picked up a business card from his desk and wrote something on the back. "This is the direct line for Patricia Okafor. She's a security consultant the company works with. She's dealt with stalking cases before. If you're more comfortable working with her instead of me, she can help you document everything properly and advise you on next steps." Nina took the card, relieved. This felt more appropriate somehow. "Thank you. That would be better, I think." "But Nina," James added, his voice firm, "if there's an emergency, if that man shows up somewhere and you're scared, you call me. I don't care what time it is or how it looks. Your safety is more important than office politics. Do you understand?" Nina nodded, feeling her throat tighten with emotion. She wasn't used to people being this straightforward about caring whether she was okay. "Has he contacted you since last night?" James asked. 3 more texts from different numbers, all blocked now. Nina pulled out her phone and showed him the screenshots she'd taken. "He's getting more persistent." One of them said, "Who was that guy? Are you dating someone else already? Is that why you won't talk to me?" James's jaw tightened. "He saw us together at the coffee shop." "Yeah, I think it made him angry." "Good," James said, and Nina looked at him in surprise. "I don't mean good that he's angry. I mean good that he knows you're not isolated. Stalkers often target people they perceive as alone and vulnerable. The more he sees you have support, the more he might back off." Nina wasn't sure she agreed, but she appreciated the thought. "I hope you're right." They talked for a few more minutes. James asked her to keep him updated through Patricia, and he promised not to single her out at work in any way that would cause gossip. When Nina finally left his office, she felt lighter somehow. Still scared about Derek, but less alone in dealing with it. The next 2 weeks fell into an uneasy rhythm. Nina met with Patricia 3 times. The security consultant was a no-nonsense woman in her 40s who treated the stalking situation with the seriousness it deserved. She helped Nina document everything properly, taught her how to check her car and apartment for tracking devices, and advised her on varying her daily routines. Predictability is dangerous, Patricia explained during their second meeting. If he knows exactly when you leave work and which route you take home, he can be waiting. Mix it up, leave at different times, take different streets, go to different grocery stores. Nina tried to follow the advice, but it was exhausting. She was constantly looking over her shoulder, constantly anxious, constantly bracing for Derek to appear around every corner. She'd lost weight because she couldn't eat properly. She wasn't sleeping well. Dark circles had appeared under her eyes that no amount of concealer could fully hide. At work, things were complicated in a different way. Maya had noticed that Nina seemed distracted and stressed, but Nina hadn't told her the full story. She didn't want to become the office drama. She wanted to be known for her work, not for her personal problems. But keeping up appearances was hard. Nina was working on a major campaign proposal that her whole team would present to senior leadership in a month. It was a huge opportunity, the kind of project that could lead to a promotion. Under normal circumstances, Nina would have been excited, pouring all her energy into making it perfect. Instead, she could barely concentrate. One afternoon, Brad called the marketing team together for a meeting. Okay, everyone. Change of plans with the campaign presentation. The CEO wants to be in the room when we pitch. He's taking a more hands-on approach with major initiatives this quarter. Nina's heart sank. Of course James would be there. She hadn't seen him since that day in his office 2 weeks ago, though she'd updated Patricia twice about Derek's continued harassment. She'd almost let herself believe she could keep her work life and her personal crisis completely separate. Apparently not. Nina, you're taking the lead on the innovative digital strategy portion, Brad continued. I want you to present that section directly. It's your concept, you should get the credit. Maya nudged her excitedly. That's amazing. This could be huge for you. Nina forced a smile and nodded, but inside she was panicking. She'd have to stand in front of James Wellington and present her work, while pretending they'd only met once briefly, during his floor visit. She'd have to be professional and confident while feeling like her life was falling apart outside the office. That evening, Nina stayed late at the office working on her presentation. Most people had gone home. The floor was quiet except for the hum of computers and the occasional sound of the cleaning crew in other departments. Nina liked it this way. It felt safer somehow, being in the building after hours when Derek wouldn't expect her to be there. She was so focused on her slides that she didn't notice someone approaching until they spoke. Working late? Nina looked up startled. James stood a few feet away, carrying a briefcase and wearing a slightly loosened tie. He looked tired. Mr. Wellington? Nina said, standing up automatically. I didn't realize anyone else was here. I had some things to finish up. Saw your light on and wanted to check everything was okay. He glanced at her computer screen. The campaign presentation? Yes, sir. Brad asked me to present the digital strategy portion. I know. I asked him to give you that section. Your work on the Thompson account last month was excellent. Creative thinking, solid execution. I want to see what else you can do. Nina stared at him. You know about the Thompson account? James smiled slightly. I read reports on all major accounts. Just because I'm on the executive floor doesn't mean I'm not paying attention to good work happening throughout the company. Nina didn't know what to say to that. She'd assumed the CEO had no idea who she was before that day in the coffee shop. How are things going? James asked, his tone shifting to something more personal. With your situation? Derek's still texting, still showing up places occasionally. Patricia has been really helpful. We're gathering evidence for a restraining order. Good, that's good. James hesitated, like he wanted to say something else but wasn't sure if he should. Before he could speak, Nina's phone buzzed on her desk. Both of them looked at it. Another unknown number, another text. I saw you working late. You care more about your job than you ever cared about me. Nina's blood ran cold. She looked at the window, her heart pounding. The office windows faced the street. Someone standing outside could see which lights were on. He's out there, she whispered. He knows I'm here. James moved to the window and looked down at the street below. I don't see anyone, but we're 7 floors up. He could be in a lot of places. Nina's hands were shaking now. The fear she'd been pushing down for weeks was rushing back full force. How does he always know where I am? I've checked my car. Patricia checked my phone and my laptop. We haven't found any tracking devices. Your social media accounts, James said suddenly. Are they public? I don't post much, but yeah, they're public. That's probably how. If you've ever checked in at locations, posted photos with recognizable backgrounds, mentioned your gym or favorite coffee shop, he could be using that information. And if you have location services enabled on your apps, some of them share your location without you realizing it. Nina felt sick. She'd been so focused on looking for physical tracking devices that she hadn't thought about digital footprints. Make your accounts private tonight, James said. Delete old posts with location information. Turn off all location services except when you absolutely need them. Nina nodded, taking mental notes even though her brain felt foggy with fear. And you're not going to your car alone, James added. I'll walk down with you. My car is in the executive garage, but I'll make sure you get to your vehicle safely. You don't have to do that. Nina, he just texted you that he's watching the building. I'm not letting you go down there by yourself. 20 minutes later, after Nina had frantically adjusted her privacy settings and saved her work, they took the elevator down to the parking garage together. The fluorescent lights flickered slightly, casting weird shadows. Every sound seemed amplified. Nina's car was on the third level of the garage near the back. She'd parked there this morning when the closer spots were taken. James walked with her all the way to her car. He waited while she checked the back seat and underneath, a routine she'd gotten used to over the past weeks. When she unlocked the door, he said, "Text Patricia when you get home safely. And Nina, consider filing for that restraining order sooner rather than later. This is escalating." Nina drove home, taking a route she'd never used before, constantly checking her rearview mirror. She didn't see Derek following her, but that didn't mean he wasn't. When she finally got to her apartment building, she sat in her car for 10 minutes watching, making sure no one was lurking in the parking lot. Her phone buzzed. A text from Patricia. James told me what happened tonight. Come to my office tomorrow morning before work. 9 a.m. We're filing for the restraining order. Nina texted back her agreement and then sent a quick message to Patricia confirming she was home safe. As James had asked, she made it inside her apartment, locked the door, and put the chain on. Only then did she let herself fall apart a little. She sat on her couch and cried. Not because anything had happened tonight, but because she was so tired. Tired of being scared, tired of looking over her shoulder, tired of Derek taking away her sense of safety and peace. The next morning, Nina met Patricia at her office downtown. The security consultant had already prepared most of the paperwork for the restraining order. They just needed to fill in the latest incidents and file it with the court. The text from last night is particularly important, Patricia explained. It shows he's monitoring your location, which demonstrates a pattern of surveillance. Combined with all the other documentation we have, you've got a strong case. They spent 2 hours going through everything, every text, every sighting, every incident over the past 3 months. Seeing it all laid out like that made Nina realize just how bad things had gotten. She'd been minimizing it in her own mind, trying to convince herself it wasn't that serious. But it was serious. It was very serious. When they filed the paperwork at the courthouse, the clerk told her there would be a hearing in 2 weeks. Derek would be served with the temporary restraining order within a few days, and then they'd both have to appear before a judge. What if that makes him angrier? Nina asked Patricia as they left the courthouse. It might, Patricia said honestly. But staying silent and hoping he goes away isn't working either. At least with a restraining order, if he violates it, he can be arrested immediately. Right now, the police can't do much. This gives them tools to protect you. Nina went straight to work from the courthouse. She was already late, and she had a mountain of things to do before the presentation next week. When she got to her desk, Maya was waiting with a concerned expression. "Brad's looking for you. He seemed annoyed that you weren't here for the morning check-in." Nina's stomach dropped. She couldn't tell Brad she'd been at the courthouse. "I had a personal appointment. It ran late. Everything okay?" "Yeah, it's fine. Just something I had to take care of." But everything wasn't fine. 20 minutes later, Brad called her into his office. He closed the door and turned to her with crossed arms. "Nina, I need to talk to you about something. I received an email this morning that concerns me." He turned his computer screen toward her. Nina's mouth went dry. It was from Derek. The email was addressed to several people in the marketing department, including Brad. The subject line read, Concerned about Nina Rodriguez. The email claimed that Nina had been harassing Derek, sending him threatening messages, showing up at his apartment uninvited. It said he'd tried to be understanding because they used to date, but that her behavior was becoming concerning and he thought her workplace should be aware that she might be unstable. Nina felt like the floor was falling out from under her. That's not true. None of that is true. He's the one who's been stalking me. I just filed for a restraining order against him this morning. Brad's expression was hard to read. So there is a situation between you and this person? Yes, but not the way he's describing it. He's my ex-boyfriend. We broke up 3 months ago and he won't leave me alone. He follows me. He sends me dozens of texts from different numbers. He shows up at places I go. I have documentation of everything. I can show you the police reports, the texts, all of it. Brad sighed heavily. Nina, I believe you. But this is exactly the kind of drama I was worried about when I promoted you to the Thompson account. Personal issues bleeding into professional space. I'm not bringing anything into the office, Nina said, hearing her voice shake. He's the one sending emails to my coworkers. I've been trying to handle this quietly so it wouldn't affect my work. I understand, and I'm sympathetic, I really am. But I need you to understand something. We have a big presentation next week. The CEO will be in that room. If there's any chance this situation could blow up or become a distraction, I need to know now. Nina felt humiliated, like her very real fear and danger was being reduced to drama and distraction. But she also understood where Brad was coming from. He had his own pressures, his own concerns about how the department looked to upper management. It won't be a distraction, Nina said firmly. I'm handling it. The restraining order will help, and my work hasn't suffered. The presentation is ready. I can do this. Brad studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Okay, I'm trusting you on this. But Nina, if anything else happens between now and the presentation, you need to tell me immediately. Nina left his office feeling defeated and angry. Derek was now attacking her professional life. He was trying to make people think she was unstable, trying to damage her reputation. It wasn't enough for him to terrorize her outside of work. He wanted to destroy everything. She sat at her desk, staring at her computer screen without really seeing it. Maya rolled her chair over, keeping her voice low. What happened in there? Nina made a split-second decision. She was tired of hiding. My ex-boyfriend is stalking me. He sent an email to Brad and others claiming I'm harassing him, which is a complete lie. I just filed for a restraining order this morning. Maya's eyes went wide. Oh my God, Nina, why didn't you tell me? Because I didn't want to become the person with problems. I wanted to just be good at my job. You are good at your job, but you're also a person who's going through something terrible. You don't have to do it alone. For the first time in weeks, Nina felt like maybe she wasn't alone. Between James's support, Patricia's expertise, and now Maya knowing the truth, she had people in her corner. It wasn't much, but it was something. That afternoon, Nina's phone buzzed with a message from Patricia. Derek has been served with the temporary restraining order. He cannot contact you or come within 100 yards of you until the hearing. If he violates it, call police immediately. Nina let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. Maybe now she could finally have some peace. Maybe now Derek would realize this was serious and leave her alone. But even as she thought it, she knew better. Derek didn't respond well to boundaries. He never had. The restraining order might make things better, or it might make things much, much worse. For 3 days after Derek was served with the restraining order, Nina's phone was silent. No unknown numbers. No strange texts. No sightings of him lurking outside her apartment or workplace. It was the quietest her life had been in months. Nina almost didn't know what to do with the peace. She kept expecting her phone to buzz, kept checking over her shoulder out of habit. But Derek stayed away. Maybe the legal consequences had finally scared him. Maybe he'd realized he couldn't keep doing this. Nina wanted to believe it was over, but a small voice in the back of her mind kept warning her not to get too comfortable. She threw herself into preparing for the presentation. It was now 5 days away, and she wanted everything to be perfect. This was her chance to show what she could do, to prove that her personal problems hadn't affected her work. Every evening she stayed late at the office, refining her slides, practicing her talking points, making sure every detail was exactly right. Maya had become a surprising source of support. After Nina told her the truth about Derek, Maya had opened up about her own experience with an ex-boyfriend who'd made her life miserable for months. They'd started having lunch together, and Maya made a point of checking in on Nina throughout the day. "You look better," Maya said one afternoon as they ate sandwiches in the break room. "Less stressed." "I feel better," Nina admitted. "It's amazing what a few days without harassment can do for your mental state." "Have you heard anything about the court hearing?" "It's scheduled for next week, right after our presentation. Derek will have to show up and explain to a judge why he thinks he should be allowed to contact me. I have all the documentation. Patricia says we have a strong case for a permanent restraining order." Maya reached across the table and squeezed Nina's hand. "You've got this. Both the presentation and the court thing. You're stronger than you think." Nina smiled, genuinely grateful. A month ago she'd felt completely alone. Now she had people supporting her. It made all the difference. The day before the presentation, Nina arrived at work feeling nervous but prepared. She knew her material inside and out. She'd practiced her section so many times she could probably deliver it in her sleep. But there was still that flutter of anxiety in her stomach. James Wellington would be in that room, along with the entire senior leadership team. This was the biggest professional moment of her career so far. Brad gathered the marketing team for one final run-through. Nina presented her section on the innovative digital strategy. It was a comprehensive plan for reaching younger demographics through social media partnerships and influencer collaborations. The concept was fresh, the data was solid, and the projected results were impressive. When she finished, Brad actually looked pleased. "That's excellent work, Nina. If you present it like that tomorrow, we'll knock their socks off." The other team members congratulated her. Even Tyler, who usually competed with her for recognition, admitted her strategy was brilliant. Nina went back to her desk feeling confident for the first time in weeks. Tomorrow was going to be okay. She could do this. That evening, Nina decided to treat herself. She'd been living on takeout and frozen meals for weeks because she was too stressed to cook. But tonight she wanted to do something normal. Something that reminded her she was still a person with a life outside of fear and work. She stopped at the grocery store on her way home, the nice one a few blocks from her apartment that she used to go to all the time before Derek started following her. She'd been avoiding it because it was predictable, but she had the restraining order now. Derek couldn't come near her without getting arrested. Nina walked through the aisles, picking up ingredients for pasta. She grabbed fresh vegetables, good Parmesan cheese, a bottle of wine. It felt almost therapeutic doing something so ordinary. She was standing in the produce section trying to decide between red and yellow peppers when she felt it, that prickling sensation on the back of her neck. The feeling of being watched. Nina turned around slowly. At first she didn't see anything unusual, just other shoppers going about their business. But then she spotted him. Derek was standing at the end of the aisle, half hidden behind a display of apples. He was staring directly at her. Her heart stopped. Then it started racing double time. Derek wasn't supposed to be here. He had a restraining order. He was violating it right now, and he knew it. But he was here anyway. Nina's first instinct was to run, but her legs felt frozen. Derek started walking toward her, not quickly, just a casual stroll like he had every right to be there. Nina finally found her voice. "Stay away from me," she said loudly. Several nearby shoppers looked over. "You have a restraining order. You're not supposed to be near me." Derek stopped about 15 feet away, his hands raised like he was innocent. "I'm just shopping, Nina. This is a public place. I have the right to buy groceries. You followed me here. You need to leave." "I didn't follow you, I was already here. It's not my fault we shop at the same store." His voice was calm, reasonable, like he was explaining something simple to a child. But his eyes were hard. Nina pulled out her phone with shaking hands. "I'm calling the police." "Go ahead. I haven't done anything wrong. I'm just shopping. Derek picked up an apple from the display and examined it casually. You can't control where I go, Nina. You can't control my whole life just because you decided you were done with me. Nina dialed 911, her finger fumbling on the screen. A woman answered, and Nina explained the situation as clearly as she could while her voice shook. My ex-boyfriend has a restraining order against him. He's here at the grocery store, violating it. I need help. The operator asked for the address and told her police were on their way. Derek had moved closer now, only about 10 feet away. He was still holding that apple, still acting like this was all perfectly normal. You ruined everything, Derek said quietly. His calm mask was starting to slip. We could have worked things out. We could have been happy. But you had to involve lawyers and courts and make me look like some kind of criminal. You've been stalking me for months, Nina said, trying to keep her voice steady, following me everywhere, watching me. That's why there's a restraining order. I wasn't stalking you. I was trying to talk to you, to make you understand that you're making a mistake. We belong together, Nina. Why can't you see that? Other shoppers had stopped now, sensing something was wrong. A store employee, a young guy maybe 20 years old, approached cautiously. Ma'am, is everything okay? No, Nina said. This man has a restraining order. I've called the police. The employee looked at Derek nervously. Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave the store. Derek's expression darkened. I have a right to be here. This is a public business. You can't kick me out for shopping. You're harassing another customer. Please leave or I'll have to call the police too. She already called them, Derek snapped. Then he seemed to catch himself, to remember he was supposed to be the reasonable one. He set down the apple carefully and looked at Nina. This isn't over. You can't hide behind a piece of paper forever. He walked away then, not toward the exit, but deeper into the store, disappearing around a corner. Nina's whole body was trembling. The store employee stayed with her, asking if she was okay, if she needed anything. Nina could barely respond. She abandoned her groceries and moved toward the front of the store, wanting to be near the exits where there were more people and cameras. The police arrived 7 minutes later. By then, Derek was gone. He'd left through the back entrance. The officers discovered when they checked the security footage. Nina gave her statement, showed them the restraining order paperwork on her phone, explained everything. They were sympathetic but honest with her. He'll claim he didn't know you were here, one officer explained, that it was a coincidence. It'll be hard to prove otherwise unless we can show a pattern of him deliberately seeking you out. But he threatened me, Nina said. He said this isn't over and I can't hide behind a piece of paper forever. The officer wrote it all down. We'll file a report for violation of the restraining order. This will be documented for your court hearing. And if he contacts you or shows up anywhere near you again, call us immediately. With multiple violations, we can arrest him. Nina drove home in a daze. Her hands were still shaking so badly she had to grip the steering wheel tight to stay steady. When she got to her apartment, she locked the door, checked all the windows, and then just sat on her couch staring at nothing. She should eat something. She should call Patricia. She should do a dozen things. But she couldn't move. The fear that she'd been pushing down for days came flooding back worse than before. Derek wasn't scared of the restraining order. If anything, it had made him bolder. Finally, Nina picked up her phone and called Patricia. She explained what happened, her voice flat and exhausted. Patricia listened without interrupting, then said, I'm adding this to the documentation for court. This is good evidence, Nina. I know it doesn't feel good, but him violating the order strengthens your case. What if he shows up tomorrow? Nina asked. At work? At the presentation? The building has security. I'll call them first thing in the morning and make sure they have Derek's photo. If he tries to enter, they won't let him in. After she hung up with Patricia, Nina sat in the silence of her apartment. She couldn't do this anymore. She couldn't keep living in fear. Couldn't keep jumping at every sound, couldn't keep wondering when Derek would show up next. But she also couldn't give up. Giving up meant letting Derek win. It meant letting him take away her job, her confidence, her whole life. Nina thought about the presentation tomorrow. She'd worked so hard on it. She'd poured everything she had into that strategy, and it was good. Really good. Brad was counting on her. The team was counting on her. And somewhere in the back of her mind, she knew James was probably hoping she'd succeed too. She couldn't let Derek take this away from her. Nina stood up, went to her kitchen, and made herself eat something even though she wasn't hungry. Then she opened her laptop and went through her presentation one more time. She practiced her talking points out loud, forcing her voice to stay steady and confident. She would walk into that conference room tomorrow and she would be brilliant. Derek wasn't going to steal this from her. The next morning, Nina woke up at 5:30 after barely sleeping. She got ready carefully, choosing her most professional outfit, a navy blue suit that made her feel put together and competent. She did her makeup, covering the dark circles under her eyes. She looked at herself in the mirror and gave herself a pep talk. You've got this. You're prepared. You're good at your job. Don't let him take this from you. She arrived at the office at 7:30, an hour before she needed to be there. The presentation wasn't until 10, but Nina wanted time to settle her nerves. She went over her slides one final time, checking every transition, every data point, every word. Maya arrived at 8 and immediately came to Nina's desk. I heard about last night. Patricia called me this morning. Are you okay? Nina was surprised. Patricia called you? She wanted someone at work to know what happened in case you needed support today. I hope that's okay. Nina felt a wave of gratitude. Yeah, it's okay. I'm glad she told you. Are you sure you're up for the presentation? I'm sure Brad would understand if you needed to postpone. No, Nina said firmly. I'm doing this. Derek has taken enough from me. He's not taking this too. At 9:45, the marketing team gathered outside the large conference room on the 8th floor. This was where major presentations happened, where important decisions were made. Through the glass walls, Nina could see senior executives filing in, taking their seats around the long table. And then she saw James Wellington enter the room. He was wearing a charcoal gray suit and looked every inch the powerful CEO. He sat at the head of the table and opened a folder in front of him. Nina's stomach flipped. She could do this. She had to do this. Brad led the team into the conference room. They took their places at the front facing all those executives. Nina's heart was pounding so hard she was sure everyone could hear it. But she kept her expression calm, professional. Brad started the presentation with an overview of the campaign objectives. Then Tyler presented the traditional marketing approach. Everything was going smoothly. And then it was Nina's turn. She stood up, moved to the front of the room, and clicked to her first slide. For just a second, her eyes met James's. He gave her the tiniest nod, so small probably no one else noticed. But Nina saw it. It steadied her. She began to speak. Our research shows that traditional advertising is increasingly ineffective with the 18 to 30 demographic. They've learned to tune out ads. They skip commercials, use ad blockers, and ignore banner ads. But they don't tune out authentic voices they trust. That's where our strategy comes in. Nina walked through her entire presentation, explaining the influencer partnership approach, the social media integration, the content creation strategy. She cited statistics. She showed projected reach and engagement numbers. She explained why this would work when traditional methods were failing. As she spoke, she felt her confidence growing. This was what she was good at. This was why she'd worked so hard to get this job. Her fear faded into the background. In this moment, she wasn't a victim being stalked by her ex-boyfriend. She was a professional presenting a solid strategy to people who could appreciate the work she'd done. When she finished, there was a moment of silence. Then James spoke. That's impressive work. The data is compelling and the strategy is innovative. I have a few questions. He asked her 3 questions, all of them thoughtful and specific. Nina answered each one clearly, backing up her responses with research and examples. James nodded, seeming satisfied. Other executives asked questions too. Nina handled all of them well. She knew her material inside and out, and it showed. When the presentation ended and the marketing team filed out of the conference room, Brad pulled Nina aside. That was outstanding. Seriously, Nina, you nailed it. Maya hugged her in the hallway. You were amazing. I knew you could do it. Nina felt like she could finally breathe. She'd done it. Despite everything happening in her personal life, despite Derek terrorizing her, despite barely sleeping the night before, she'd walked into that room and delivered an excellent presentation. That afternoon, Nina got an email. It was from James's assistant, asking her to come to the executive floor at 4 o'clock. Nina's heart started racing again, but this time with a different kind of nervousness. When she arrived at James's office, he was standing by the window, looking out at the city. He turned when she entered.